Hey Newell, Kim was having a normal Thursday morning until she wasn't. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. Usually, her 16-year-old son Taiho would be rushing around, grabbing breakfast while complaining about his early morning physics class. But today, there was only silence. Taho, she called out, walking down the hallway to his bedroom. The door was closed. She knocked 3 times, waited, then opened it. The bed was made, unusual for a teenager, and his backpack was gone. His desk was perfectly organized, which immediately set off alarm bells in her head. In 15 years, Taiho had never organized his desk voluntarily. Newell pulled out her phone and called her son. The call went straight to voicemail. She checked her messages. Nothing. She opened her tracking app, the one all parents in her neighborhood used. The screen showed an error message. Device not found. Something was very wrong. 20 minutes later, Hey Newell sat in her home office, her military training kicking in. Before becoming a full-time mom, she had been a strategic operations specialist in the Korean military. The skills she'd learned there had never really left her. On her computer screen, she played the security footage from their apartment building's hallway. At 6:43 a.m., the video showed Taiho leaving their apartment with his backpack, heading toward the elevator. Normal enough. But at 6:44 a.m., something strange happened. A soft blue light filled the hallway. The image blurred for exactly 3 seconds, and when it cleared, Taiho was gone. Not just out of frame, completely gone. Newell rewound and played the footage again and again. By the 10th viewing, she had noticed something else. Just before the blue light appeared, Taiho's phone had lit up with an unusual symbol, something that looked like a triangle inside a circle, but with strange markings around it. She picked up her phone and called her old colleague from the military, Captain Sunwoo Park. "Sunwoo, I need a favor," she said when he answered. "I need you to check if there have been any unusual disappearances reported in the last 24 hours, specifically teenagers." There was a pause on the other end. "Hey Newell, it's been years. What's going on?" "Taiho is missing. And I don't mean regular missing. I mean vanished in a blue light missing." Another pause. "Give me an hour." While waiting for Sunwoo's call, Hey Newell did what she did best. She gathered intelligence. She pulled up Taiho's academic records, his recent browser history, his social media accounts. Everything seemed normal until she noticed something in his email spam folder. An email from 3 days ago with that same strange symbol in the subject line. The email body was empty, but the metadata showed it had been opened. Her phone rang. Sunwoo's voice was tense. "You need to come to the office." 45 minutes later, Hey Newell sat in a secure conference room at the military intelligence headquarters in Seoul. On the screen in front of her, Sunwoo displayed a map of the world. Red dots appeared one by one. "In the last 72 hours, we've recorded 47 similar incidents worldwide. All teenagers between 15 and 17. All top students in their respective schools. All disappeared in the same way. Security cameras show a blue light, then nothing." Hey Newell's hands tightened into fists. Why hasn't this made the news? Because it's happening too fast and too spread out. Local authorities are treating each case separately. We only noticed the pattern because of what happened 3 hours ago. He switched to another screen, showing satellite footage of a remote area in the mountains. The image showed what looked like a perfect circle burned into the ground, about 30 meters wide. "We detected an unusual energy signature at this location. It matches readings we've been picking up at each disappearance site, just much stronger. And there's more." He zoomed in on part of the image. "Look familiar." There it was, the triangle circle symbol, burned into the ground at the edge of the circle. Newell stood up. "I need everything you have on this. Every report, every image, every energy reading. And I need a car." Sunwoo shook his head. "Newell, You're not military anymore. This is an official investigation now. We have teams. My son," she cut him off, her voice steel sharp, "is out there somewhere. And whoever or whatever took him didn't count on one thing. His mom used to track enemy movements across the DMZ for a living." She leaned forward, placing both hands on the table. "You can either help me, or I can do this myself. But I am doing this." Sun Wu looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. "I'll get you the files. And hey Newell." He pulled out a key card from his desk. "Take my car. It's got better clearance for mountain roads." 2 hours later, Hey Newell was driving up a narrow mountain road, a tablet beside her displaying energy readings. In the trunk were supplies she'd grabbed from home, climbing gear, a first aid kit, emergency rations, and her old field kit that she'd never quite gotten around to returning to the military. The tablet beeped. The energy readings were getting stronger. She parked the car and continued on foot, following the signal. As she crested a hill, she saw it, a clearing that matched the satellite image perfectly. But now there was something else there. Half hidden under advanced-looking camouflage technology was what could only be described as a spacecraft. It was small, maybe large enough for 2 or 3 people, with sleek lines that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. And there, on its side, was the symbol. Newell checked her watch. It had been exactly 12 hours since Taiho disappeared. She touched the small pendant she always wore, a gift from Taiho on Mother's Day 3 years ago. Then she pulled out her old field kit and began assembling what she needed. Whoever had taken her son had made a serious mistake. They had assumed that parents would panic, that they would wait for authorities to handle things. They hadn't counted on a mom with military training and a very particular set of skills in finding things that didn't want to be found. As she worked, Hey Newell remembered something her own mother used to say: "Never underestimate a Korean mom when it comes to her children's future." She allowed herself a small smile. She was about to give that saying a whole new meaning. The sun was setting when she detected movement near the spacecraft. A figure emerged, human-looking, but moving with an odd grace that seemed just slightly off. Hey Newell readied herself. She had no idea what she was about to face, but she knew one thing for certain. She was getting her son back, even if she had to search every star in the sky to do it. And if anyone or anything stood in her way, well, they were about to learn why you don't mess with a slightly pissed-off Korean mom. Hey Newell moved silently through the mountain brush. Years of military training had taught her how to stay hidden, and she hadn't forgotten. The figure near the spacecraft was doing something with a small device, completely unaware of her presence. As she got closer, Hey Newell could see the person more clearly. It was a woman, probably in her 50s, wearing what looked like a uniform made of shifting colors that almost, but not quite, matched the surrounding environment. Newell waited until the woman turned away from her. Then she moved. 3 quick steps, completely silent. The woman started to turn, but it was too late. Hey Newell had her in a perfect hold, one arm locked behind her back. "Don't move," Hey Newell said quietly. "I have questions. You have answers." The woman didn't struggle. Instead, she laughed softly. "You must be Taiho's mother." Newell tightened her grip slightly. "How do you know my son's name?" "He talks about you constantly. My mom was in the military," he says. "My mom could figure this out in seconds. He's very proud of you." The woman's Korean was perfect, but there was something odd about her accent. "I'm Jaewon. I was taken just like your son, 30 years ago." Newell didn't loosen her hold. "Where is he?" "Safe. Learning. Being given an opportunity that most humans would die for." Jaewon's voice was calm. "I'm his designated Earth contact. I was supposed to meet with you next week. Explain everything properly." "Explain now." Jaewon sighed. "Could you let me go? It's a long story, and this position is uncomfortable." Newell considered for a moment, then released her, but kept herself between Jaewon and the spacecraft. talk. Your son, along with the others, was selected for the Stellar Academic Enhancement Program. Think of it as an intergalactic scholarship program. We choose the brightest students from developing worlds and give them access to education that their planets can't provide yet, without asking their parents. Jai-1 had the grace to look embarrassed. We find that parents often struggle with the concept. The plan was to introduce it gradually, after the students had settled in. Hae-Newell's voice was ice cold. Take me to him. Mrs. Kim, it's not that simple. The Centauri Educational Complex is. Either you take me to my son, or I find a way there myself. And trust me, you don't want me looking for alternate transportation methods. Jai-1 studied her face for a long moment. You're serious. Deadly. Another long pause. Then Ji-1 nodded. The ship can take 2 people, but you should know, once we leave Earth's atmosphere, there's no turning back until we reach the complex. Fine. And you'll need to change clothes. Earth fabrics don't react well to faster than light travel. 20 minutes later, Hae-Newell was wearing one of the color-shifting uniforms from Ji-1's ship. She had insisted on keeping her pendant, though. Ji-1 hadn't argued. The inside of the ship was surprisingly simple. 2 seats, a lot of screens with strange symbols, and what looked like a glass ball floating in the center of the control panel. Sit there, Ji-1 pointed to one of the seats. And whatever you do, don't touch the sphere. It's calibrated to my biosignature. Hae-Newell sat down, watching as Ji-1 went through what seemed to be pre-flight checks. How long until we reach this complex? About 6 hours, if we don't hit any solar wind turbulence. Ji-1 touched the floating sphere, and the ship hummed to life. I should warn you, the first jump can be uncomfortable. The ship rose silently into the air. Through the front window, Hae-Newell could see the mountains getting smaller. The sky darkened rapidly from blue to black. There was no sensation of movement, but Earth was already looking like a blue marble below them. Ready for the jump? Ji-1 asked. Just do it. Ji-1 touched a series of symbols on one of the screens. You might want to close your eyes for this part. Hae-Newell kept her eyes wide open. The stars in front of them seemed to stretch, like strings of light being pulled tight. Then everything went blue. The same blue as the light that had taken Taiho. Hae-Newell's stomach lurched, and for a moment she thought she could see through her own hands. Then everything snapped back to normal, or almost normal. The stars looked different, and there were 2 suns visible through the window. Welcome to the Centauri system, Ji-1 said. The complex is orbiting the smaller sun. We'll be there in about 5 hours. Hae-Newell looked at the alien stars. Tell me everything about this complex. What kind of security do they have? How many students are there? What are their protocols? Ji-1 glanced at her. You're not planning anything aggressive, are you? I'm planning to get my son back. How aggressive that gets depends entirely on your people. They're not exactly my people. I just work for them. Ji-1 adjusted something on the control panel. But if you're asking, security is tight. The complex has about 300 Earth students right now, plus another 1,000 from various other developing worlds. The security protocols are based on an AI system that. Show me. Hae-Newell interrupted. Show me everything. The layout, the schedules, the communication systems. Consider it. Parent-teacher conference preparation. Ji-1 hesitated, then shrugged. I suppose there's no harm. You'll see it all anyway once we arrive. She touched the sphere again, and one of the screens filled with diagrams and text. For the next few hours, Hae-Newell absorbed everything Ji-1 showed her. The complex's layout, the daily schedules, the communication systems that let students talk to each other across different sections, the security protocols that were supposed to keep everyone safe. All the while, her military-trained mind was noting weaknesses, access points, and potential leverage opportunities. These people had taken her son without permission. They were about to learn that was a very, very big mistake. As they approached the complex, a massive structure that looked like a silver snowflake floating in space, Haenul touched her pendant and thought of Taiho. "I'm coming," she whispered. Jaiwan looked at her nervously. "Mrs. Kim, please remember that this is an educational facility, whatever you're planning." "Oh, don't worry," Haenul said, smiling slightly. "I'm just here to discuss my son's education." The complex grew larger in their view. Haenul could see ships coming and going, lights twinkling along the structure's arms, and what looked like gardens visible through huge transparent domes. Her smile grew a little wider. Somewhere in that massive structure was her son. And if these people thought they could keep him from her, they were about to get an education of their own. In why you should always ask a Korean mother's permission before enrolling her child in any program, intergalactic or otherwise. The ship began its docking sequence. Haenul straightened her borrowed uniform and checked that her pendant was secure. Time to see what this stellar academic enhancement program was all about. And maybe, just maybe, teach them a few things they hadn't planned on learning. The docking bay of the Centauri Educational Complex was enormous. Ships of various sizes and shapes lined the walls. Haenul followed Jaiwan through the arrival procedures, keeping her face neutral as they passed through several security checkpoints. "Director Du Young will meet with us," Jaiwan said, leading the way down a bright corridor. "He oversees all Earth student programs." They entered a large office with windows that looked out into space. Director Du Young stood behind a desk that seemed to be made of flowing metal. He was tall and thin, wearing the same kind of uniform as Jaewon, but with gold trim. "Mrs. Kim," he said, bowing slightly, "we weren't expecting a parent visit so soon." "Clearly," Haenul replied. "Where is my son?" "Taiho is in his advanced physics class right now. He's doing exceptionally well." Du Young gestured to a chair. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." Haenul remained standing. "I want to see him." "Of course, but first we should talk about the program. Your son has an amazing opportunity here. The knowledge he'll gain will benefit not just him, but all of Earth when he returns. When will that be?" Do Young's smile faltered slightly. "The standard program is 3 years. 3 years. Haenul's voice was deadly quiet. "You took my son for 3 years without asking me. Mrs. Kim, please understand. Earth is not yet ready for open contact with the galactic community. We had to be discreet." Haenul looked at the window behind him, at the stars beyond. "I want to speak to all the Earth students. Now." "That's not possible. They're in different classes across various sections of the complex." "Then use your announcement system. Mrs. Kim, either you let me speak to them, or I start making things very difficult for your program." Do Young studied her face, then sighed. "Very well. A brief announcement only." He touched his desk, and a screen appeared in the air. "The communication system is yours." Haenul stepped forward. She remembered the security protocols Jaewon had shown her during their flight. The announcement system wasn't just for voice. It could transmit data as well. She began to speak. "Attention all Earth students. This is Haenul Kim, Taho Kim's mother. I'm here at the complex, and I have some questions about your situation." As she spoke, her fingers moved across the screen, accessing deeper layers of the system. "If you'd like to discuss these questions, please gather in the main assembly hall in 1 hour." Do Young quickly cut off the transmission. "That's enough. I'll arrange for you to see Taiho now." But Haenul had already done what she needed. While speaking, she had sent a data packet through the system, one that gave every Earth student's personal device access to certain restricted communication channels. 1 hour later, the assembly hall was full. Not just with Earth students, but with students from other worlds too. Haenul stood on the stage, looking out at hundreds of young faces. She spotted Taiho in the crowd, looking embarrassed, but also somehow proud. "Your parents don't know where you are," she said simply. "None of them do. You were taken without consent, without warning. She paused. How many of you want to contact your families? Nearly every hand went up. Director Du Young says Earth isn't ready for open contact. She smiled. But they took you because you're the brightest students of your generation. So let me ask you this. Are you ready to decide for yourselves? A murmur went through the crowd. Hay Newell saw Du Young and several other administrators entering the hall, looking worried. I've given you access to the complex's communication systems. You can reach your families now. The choice is yours. The hall erupted in chaos. Students pulled out their devices, fingers flying across screens. The administrators tried to restore order, but it was too late. Hay Newell watched as hundreds of messages began streaming out across space, heading toward Earth. Each message carried not just words, but proof. Images, videos, data about the complex and its program. Mrs. Kim, Du Young's voice was sharp. Do you realize what you've done? The protocols, the agreements with other systems, were made without Earth's consent. She finished for him. And now that's changing. Tai-Ho had made his way to the stage. Mom, he said, half proud and half mortified. Did you really come all this way just to get me? Of course I did. She looked at her son. Though I think things have gotten a bit bigger than that now. Indeed they had. On screens throughout the hall, messages were appearing from other parts of the complex. Students from other worlds were following the Earth students' lead, contacting their own families. The carefully controlled structure of the Stellar Academic Enhancement Program was unraveling. The Proxima and Sirius administrations will hear about this, Du Young said. There will be consequences. Good, Hay Newell replied. I look forward to meeting them. We had a lot to discuss about proper educational protocols. She turned back to the students, who were now organizing themselves into discussion groups, sharing information and strategies. Some were already drafting formal requests for parent-teacher conferences across multiple star systems. Tai-Ho looked at the chaos his mother had caused, then at Hay Newell. You know, Mom, I was learning really cool stuff here. And you still can, she said, but properly, with permission, and with your family knowing where you are. She paused. Also, you're grounded for not calling me before accepting an alien scholarship. Mom. 3 weeks, no intergalactic video games. Around them, the academic uprising continued to spread. Students from 3 star systems were now connected, sharing their stories, demanding changes. The complex's administrators rushed around, trying to contain the situation, but it was like trying to hold back a tide with their hands. Hay Newell watched it all with satisfaction. She hadn't planned to start an intergalactic student rights movement when she woke up yesterday morning. But as her own mother always said, sometimes the best lessons aren't in any curriculum. And right now, the Centauri Educational Complex was getting an education of its own, in the power of determined parents and the importance of proper permission slips, even across the vastness of space. 3 days after what students were now calling the Great Parent Notification, Hay Newell sat in a large conference room aboard the complex. Holographic screens showed representatives from the Proxima and Sirius systems, along with various education officials from all 3 star systems. Director Du Young looked tired. The situation has become untenable. We have received over 10,000 messages from Earth parents alone. Not to mention the messages from other worlds, added Professor Sangmei, who had become an unexpected ally. She was the head of the Xenobiology department and had approached Hay Newell the day before, saying she had always disagreed with the secrecy policy. Hay Newell watched the faces on the screens. Where is my son's group now? The advanced physics students were transferred to the Sirius Learning Center yesterday. One of the Sirius representatives said, for their safety during this situation. Hay Newell's voice remained calm, but her eyes narrowed. You moved them without informing me. We have the right to arrange our educational programs as we see fit, the representative replied. No, Hay Newell said, standing up. You had the ability to do it. That's not the same as having the right. She walked to the main display and pulled up a document she had prepared. This is a formal complaint filed with the Intergalactic Education Council. It details every violation of basic rights committed by your program. The council has no jurisdiction over developing worlds. Du Yum protested. Actually, Professor Sangmai interrupted. They do. The moment we began taking students from Earth, we acknowledged Earth as a participating world in intergalactic education. Mrs. Kim's complaint is valid. The room erupted in argument. Hey Newell let them talk, watching the reactions carefully. The Proxima representatives looked nervous. The serious officials were angry. But some of the education staff, like Sangmai, seemed relieved that these issues were finally being addressed. There's more, Hey Newell said when the noise died down. The students have formed their own organization. They're calling it the Interstellar Student Rights Association. They've already drafted a proposal for proper enrollment procedures. She displayed another document. This one had been written by students from all three systems, working together through the communication channels she had helped them access. Taiho had helped organize it, which made her proud despite her worry about his current location. This is ridiculous, the serious representative said. They're children. They can't make these decisions. They're the brightest young minds from dozens of worlds, Hey Newell countered. You chose them for exactly that reason. Are you saying you don't trust their judgment now? Professor Sangmei stepped forward. I move that we consider their proposal. Many of us have wanted reform for years. And if we refuse? The serious representative asked. Newell smiled slightly. Then every parent of every student will receive detailed information about where their children are and how they were taken. I'm sure the media on thousands of worlds would be very interested. The threat hung in the air. The representatives from Proxima and Sirius whispered among themselves. You're asking us to completely restructure a program that has existed for centuries, Du Young said. I'm asking you to do it right. Hey Newell replied. With transparency. With consent. With proper procedures. She paused. And I'm asking you to bring my son's group back from Sirius immediately. Or, the Sirius representative challenged, or I'll go get them myself. Hey Newell's voice was matter-of-fact. And given what's happened so far, do you really want to see what I can do when I'm actually trying to cause trouble? The room went quiet. Several people looked at the chaos she had already caused just trying to find her son. The student uprising, the thousands of parent messages, the formal complaint with the council, all of it had happened in just 3 days. Perhaps, Professor Sangmei suggested carefully, we should consider Mrs. Kim's experience in strategic operations. She could help us design the new procedures. Newell raised an eyebrow. She hadn't told anyone about her military background. Sangmei smiled. We do check parents' backgrounds before selecting students. Your skills could be very useful in reforming the program properly. The representatives began talking again, this time more seriously. Hey Newell watched as the conversation shifted from whether to change to how to change. The Sirius Learning Center will return the physics students tomorrow, the Sirius representative finally announced. And we will review the proposed reforms. Today, Hey Newell corrected. The students return today. I'll be going with the transport to ensure their safe arrival. More arguments broke out, but Hey Newell could see she had won. The 3-star system's carefully managed education program was changing, whether they liked it or not. Professor Sangmei touched her arm. You know, we really could use your help with the reforms, and having an Earth representative involved would show good faith. Hey Newell thought about it. She had come here just wanting to find her son. But now she had the chance to make sure no other parent would have to do what she did. I'll consider it, she said. After my son is back. And after he's finished being grounded for accepting an alien scholarship without permission. Sangmei laughed. You know, in all our years of running this program, we never considered one simple fact, that Earth parents might be more formidable than any security system we could design. Newell touched her pendant. You should have asked my mother. She could have told you. Never get between a Korean mom and her child's education. The meeting continued, now focused on immediate logistical concerns. Hay Newell participated while watching the clock. In a few hours, she would see her son again. And after that, well, it seemed she had accidentally started a career in intergalactic education reform. She smiled to herself. Wait until she told her mother about this at their next family dinner. 1 month after what was now being called the Great Educational Reform, Hay Newell sat in her newly assigned office in the Centauri Educational Complex. The wall behind her desk displayed 3 certificates, formally recognizing her as Earth's representative to each of the star system's education boards. She was reading through student application forms when Taeho knocked on her door. "Mom, this is embarrassing," he said, walking in. "Do you have to approve every Earth student's application personally?" "Yes," Hay Newell replied, not looking up. "And their parents' approval forms too. But you're making the process so slow." "I'm making it right." She finally looked at her son. "How was your quantum mechanics test?" Taeho brightened. "Perfect score. Professor Sangmai said I might be ready for the advanced class next term." He paused. "If you approve it, we'll discuss it at dinner. Your grandmother is visiting through the new family portal system today." The family portal system had been Hay Newell's first major change to the program. Now, parents could visit their children through secure teleportation points set up on Earth. It had taken some explaining to world governments, but after Hay Newell's actions had forced the existence of the program into the open, most countries had been surprisingly quick to adapt. "Grandmother is coming." Taeho looked nervous. Is she still angry about the whole alien scholarship thing? "Less angry than last week," Hay Newell said, smiling. "Though she did say she's bringing her special discipline sauce." Taeho groaned. "Mom, I'm 16. I'm studying advanced physics in space. Can't you stop her?" "You try stopping your grandmother when she's made up her mind." Hay Newell returned to her paperwork. "Besides, she's proud of you. She just shows it by making sure you remember your manners across all known space." A light flashed on Hay Newell's desk, an incoming call from the Sirius system. She answered, and a holographic screen appeared. "Representative Kim," the Sirius Education Minister said formally. "We need your input on the new exchange student protocol." "Of course." Hay Newell looked at her son. "Taeho, don't be late for dinner. You know how your grandmother feels about punctuality." After Taeho left, Hay Newell spent the next hour going through the new protocols with the Sirius officials. They had learned quickly that it was better to get her approval early rather than risk another incident. Later that evening, Hay Newell sat with her family in her complex apartment's dining room. The view of distant stars through the windows still amazed her sometimes, but not as much as watching her mother scold Taeho in 3 different languages. She had insisted on learning basic Proximan and Syrian to properly communicate with her grandson's teachers. You should have seen her face when he accepted without asking. Hay Newell's mother was telling Professor Sangmai, who had become a regular guest at family dinners, just like when she was young and tried to go to summer camp without permission. "Mother," Hay Newell interrupted, "I don't think Professor Sangmai needs to hear about that." "Oh, but I do," Sangmai said, grinning. "It might help us understand how you managed to reorganize 3 star systems worth of educational bureaucracy in less than a month." "She's always been like this," Hay Newell's mother said proudly. Once she decided to repaint her room, and by the end of the week the whole neighborhood had formed a home improvement committee. Taeho looked up from his homework. "Is that why they made you head of the Interstellar Student Rights Committee too?" Hay Newell thought about the changes of the past month. The program was now fully transparent, with proper procedures for everything from student selection to parent visits. Earth had been officially recognized as a participating world in galactic education, with all the benefits that brought. And somehow, in the process of finding her son, she had become one of the most influential voices in interstellar education. "They didn't make me head of the committee," she corrected. "The students elected me, after they elected themselves as voting members of the education board." which they could only do because someone gave them access to the communication systems, Sang-Mei added, raising an eyebrow. I have no idea what you're talking about, Hae-Nul said innocently. I was just looking for my son. Her mother laughed. Of course you were, dear, and I'm just here to make sure my grandson eats properly and respects his elders across all known space. After dinner, Hae-Nul stood at the window, looking out at the stars. Tae-ho joined her, having finished his homework. Mom, he said quietly, thank you, not just for coming to find me, but for making it better for everyone. Hae-Nul put her arm around her son's shoulders. That's what parents do. We make things better for our children. She paused, though usually not across 3-star systems. Yeah, about that. Tae-ho looked nervous again. Some students from the Andromeda Galaxy have been asking about exchange programs. One galaxy at a time, Hae-Nul said firmly. Let's get these 3-star systems properly organized first. In her office, the certificates glowed softly in the starlight. Earth representative to the Centauri Education Board. Earth representative to the Proxima Education Board. Earth representative to the Sirius Education Board. Not bad, Hae-Nul thought, for someone who had just been looking for her kid. Somewhere in the complex, the Students' Committee was probably planning their next proposal for educational reform. The administrators of 3-star systems were probably worrying about what changes she would demand next. And her mother was probably planning next week's dinner menu and thinking about learning a 4th alien language. But right now, Hae-Nul was just happy to stand with her son, watching the stars, knowing that thanks to one slightly pissed-off mom's determination, the future of interstellar education would never be quite the same again.